Hello, 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 everyone. Welcome to another episode of Sree's Global COVID-19 Show. My name is Sree Sreenivasan, and it's my honor to convene this conversation around various aspects of the global pandemic. Today is episode 292, Helping Refugees in Connecticut. There's a chance for us to talk about the refugee crisis by looking at the efforts in one particular state in the United States. But of course, we'll be touching on issues that affect people all over the world. Our co-host is Rose Horowitz, who all of you know, a journalist, founder, and host of Women to Follow, the hashtag Women to Follow, and the show Women to Follow. You'll hear more about that later. We're going to be joined by two experts, Chris George, Executive Director of IRIS, Connecticut's largest refugee resettlement agency, and Mark Pierce, who is with the ValleyStandsUp.org, which is doing important work also to deal with refugees and to help them. And you will meet both of them in just a moment. Hi, everyone. I'm Sree. Thank you very much for being here. Happy Diwali. For those of you who celebrate, I'm wearing my kurta. I was out at a Diwali event and planning to change, and then I decided no need to change. We'll just talk to you and wish you all a happy Diwali. It's the fight of good over evil, the triumph of good over evil, and we could use some of that all over the world right now. We are very grateful to all of you for being here, for your time, and we hope you will tag a friend who's interested in the refugee issue, and they can watch us live or later. We're on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and LinkedIn right now, and as soon as the show is over, your friends can watch. When they come back, it'll be live on all of those channels. So please tell your friends. Let's tell you a little bit about the show. In our first 285 episodes, we've had 545 guests, including 311 women from 75 cities and 22 countries, including the chief scientist of the World Health Organization. We're in partnership with Scroll Global and Scroll.in, and our archives are at youtube.com/Sreenet. Please subscribe and hit that notification bell. And we're able to do this because of our producer and good friend Rose Horowitz and our producer and good friend Vandana Menon. Vandana is in New Delhi, India now, after spending so much time in Philly and in New York with us on this journey over these 18 months. And we are always looking for your ideas on how we can improve the show, who are the guests you'd like to hear from. And the show is brought to you by our production company and our social media consulting firm, Digimentors. And we do conferences, summits, talk shows, webinars, podcasts for other folks, including doing shows like this ourselves. And we'd love to work with you. If you have a project or a virtual event or a hybrid event you'd like to do, please get in touch. And we're able to do this show because of the support of our sponsors. And we'd like to give you a trailer about one of them.
We're throwing this dinner thing next Saturday. You guys should come.
You invited who? Local shopkeeper. We are running a charity service, huh?
Sure, Aunties Without Borders.
Sheila, it's me, Bhairavi, Delhi University. Your mother was incredibly brave.
Back then, my life was complicated. I want your life to be simple.
Parents are full of surprises. Our parents are full of
Okay.
All right, that's an ad, as you saw, for Indian Sweets and Spices. And that's a show, that's a movie that's unleashing in theaters all over America on November 19th. And for the eagle-eyed amongst you, you caught Manisha Koirala, the famous Bollywood actress who's been twice a guest on this show, who came to us live from Mumbai. She is starring in this film along with a whole lot of great actors, and it's going to be a fun movie, as you can see. So please check out Indian Sweets and Spices, November 19th. And with that, we are ready to bring on stage our guests and to tell you more about how we are, sorry, there's a wrong card there. We are going to tell you about helping refugees in Connecticut and everything they're working on to help the plight of refugees. So we are going to first just bring on Rose Horowitz just to say hello first. And Rose, thank you so much for all you do, including putting together our show tonight. I know you were working on it for almost 2 months. Hi, Rose.
Hi. Yes, it may seem like it's going to go by in 40 minutes, but it's I looked at my notes, and since the end of September, I've been trying.
Yeah, so that tells you, also our friends who are joining us, they are working very hard with the refugees, and that, of course, takes time. We should remind everybody that among the great guests you booked when we were doing these episodes every night was this friend of ours, Maria Ressa, who on July 23rd was with us, and there you are on screen with her. And Maria won the Nobel Prize this past month, and we are so delighted for her. And just an example of the quality of the guests we get. Not everyone's going to win a Nobel Prize, but they all should be winning Nobel Prizes. So, Rose, I'm going to say hello to our guests, and then you're going to lead much of the conversation, and then I'll come back with some comments. And everybody watching, tell us where you're watching from. Tell us if you have refugees in your community and what's happening there. And we have so much to learn. So let me bring back on stage.
Happy Diwali.
Yes, thank you. Happy Diwali. So let's say hi to Chris George, is the executive director of IRIS Connecticut, and Mark Pierce, who's with the valleystandsUp.org. So welcome to you both. Thank you for being here. Let me start with my question to everybody is first, how are you? Where are you? And how has your family handled the crisis? And just because some of us know Connecticut really well, and many of us don't, including me, even though I don't live too far from Connecticut. Tell us a little bit about Connecticut as you frame your answer. So, Chris, we'll start with you, and then we'll go to Mark.
Right. Well, thanks a lot for having me on the show. Sree, thank you. Rose, thank you. It's a real honor, and it could not be a more crazy time for refugee resettlement. This is the busiest that we have been in our 40 years of existence. Never before has our refugee resettlement agency been asked to resettle so many refugees in such a short period of time. I'm speaking from my home in Glastonbury, which is near Hartford. Our office is in New Haven. Our main office is in New Haven, but we've just recently opened up an office in Hartford. But that's just part of the story. So many of the refugees that we resettle in the state of Connecticut are helped by community groups. And in fact, Mark is from one of the community groups in Connecticut that's going to be helping us resettle Afghan refugees. So it's a busy time. We love this work, welcoming persecuted people from all over the world. Helping them start new lives is probably the best thing this country does. It's one of our finest foreign policies. It's our oldest and most noble tradition. And the 100,000 Afghan refugees who will be resettled over the next few months are really going to test us. It's really going to be a challenge. The only way we're going to do it is with help from the community, with people like Mark and groups like his.
And we will, of course, ask both of you to tell us how people who are not in Connecticut and in Connecticut can help and what all it'll take. So let's go to Mark and just welcome him as well.
Well, again, thank you for having me, both Rose and Sree. Yeah, we are a co-sponsorship group with IRIS. And so we work under the auspices of IRIS. IRIS gives us a terrific amount of support in terms of connections to help us recruit volunteers, so a lot of structure, training, and but it's up to us to actually do a lot of the groundwork in order to prepare for the refugee family.
Thank you. I'm just looking at some of the comments we have here. Tim Sohn is watching from Northeast Pennsylvania. Renu Pathak is watching from California by the way of New Delhi, then Manila, then New York. And Maria is so deserving of the Nobel. My wife is watching from down the hall, and she says, hi, and Rose. Hi, Rose and Sree. Wonderful topic, and great job, Rose. And Arun is watching from Sri Lanka. And he says, Happy Diwali to all of you. Deepavali is another way to say Diwali. And Jonathan Borstein, who has watched every episode. Even I've not watched every episode because Rose has stepped in for me on more than one occasion. 292 episodes. Jonathan, thank you so much for watching from the East Village. And you'll be hearing from folks throughout the show. So now I'm going to hand this over to Rose, and she's going to take it away. So Rose, over to you.
Hi. So delighted to have you here, and it's an honor. And I can see after I read how much you've done, how much you've done in just October, I can see why I couldn't get you on the show to come to join us. So let me start asking you, Chris, how many families or how many people has the IRIS brought in just in October?
Well, let's see now. In September and October, we've brought in almost 200 individuals. And just compare that to some previous years over the, I've been doing this for 16 years. There were some years when we resettled 200 refugees in 1 year, in one 12-month period. We have welcomed about 200 in just 2 months. We expect to welcome another 100 over the next month. So it's a lot of people coming. They're now on military bases in, across the United States. They've been evacuated from Afghanistan. All of these are people who are in danger because they had some kind of connection to the United States while it was in Afghanistan for those 20 years.
Can you give us an example of a family that you've helped and how many children? I saw, I guess, a Today Show story about a family that is resettled in Connecticut and the father was with 4 little girls.
Yeah, these are big families. I was at the office 2 nights ago and 3 families, total of 16 people, arrived around 1:30 a.m. I don't know why the U.S. government has to bring them so late, but we had 4 case managers there welcoming them. And in some cases, these are people who were interpreters, and that's why they're in danger, or they were directors of a radio broadcast promoting democracy, or they ran a laundromat on a Marine base in Kandahar, or they were drivers, or they were managers, or they built roads. I mean, any number of activities that the U.S. government conducted over those 20 years. It employed, hundreds of thousands of Afghans. And with the Taliban taking over, their lives are at risk, and they and their families have been evacuated. Not all of them, just part of them. And there's still a lot of people in Afghanistan who are still in danger. But as a refugee resettlement agency, our priority is to welcome people, set them up in an apartment, enroll the kids in school, connect them to healthcare, help them learn English, help them get jobs, and do all this as quickly as we can because we don't really get that much money from the federal government, and we've got many more families coming behind them.
Thank you. One of the there was a story yesterday. The governor came to New Haven, and he talked about, and you talked about the problem in Connecticut, which is that because of the COVID and people wanting to, move to the suburbs, that there's a housing shortage, and I think it's in the cities as well. You said, I think on a broadcast that you would guarantee, landlords are hesitant to bring these families who are coming with nothing, right, to rent to them. And you said, and what are you doing about that issue? And what did the governor say? And, how can we, as well as other communities, I'm sure around the country, help these refugees?
Yeah. The emphasis on that press event was housing. And, I've been to a lot of press conferences and, media events. Never before have we had an event that focused specifically on the housing crisis. First of all across the United States, there's a shortage of affordable housing. And you see that in Connecticut as well. On top of that, the prices of apartments have gone up. And we're a nonprofit. Refugees don't come with much money, limited budget. They're lucky if they get a job at minimum wage. They have to find affordable apartments. We have to find affordable apartments for them. And then another problem we have is that sometimes landlords, they don't know what a refugee is. It's just too complicated. They'd rather have an American, someone who speaks English. So we go out of our way to make sure that the landlord does not feel that he or she is taking a risk. We'll say, if there's any risk to be taken, it'll be ours, the Refugee Resettlement Agency. We stand behind these people. We'll make sure they get jobs. We'll make sure they pay the rent on time and in full. In fact, we will co-sign the lease, is what we tell them. And I just got a call from a landlord today who heard about that press conference, and he said, hey, I own a building, 2 apartments. I'd like to rent them to refugees.
That's awesome. I know that it's hard in New York City, and I'm sure in Connecticut. I have kids who've tried to, that you often can't get an apartment if you don't show a certain amount of income. And in this tri-state area, it's a lot of income, so guaranteeing an apartment is huge. How much do you guarantee for 2 months? What is the kind of, how does it work? Let's say.
Yeah. Well, it's good. It's a good question, Rose. A lot of people are asking me that. In fact, the landlord who called me today asked me, so, how does this work? The U.S. government, the Department of State, is going to give every refugee who arrives in this country $1,000 for their direct expenses. And if it's a family of 5, that'll be roughly $5,000. And that'll be spent almost entirely on rent. If the apartment costs $2,000 a month, how long is that going to last? 2.5 months, maybe. Governor Malloy, Malloy, Governor Lamont, the governor of Connecticut, wants to help these Afghan refugees. So the state of Connecticut is adding 2 or 3 more months rent on top of that. So that's terrific. So we're up to about 5-6 months now. And IRIS will help subsidize if we have to. After 5 months, a lot of these refugees are going to have jobs. So they'll be able to help pay the rent with their employment income. But our co-signing the lease, most of these leases are 12 months. We're guaranteeing that the rent will be paid one way or another, whether it's from the federal government, the state government, the refugees' income, or IRIS subsidies. One way or another, that rent will be paid for 12 months. And landlords should be thrilled about that. I mean, come on. If there are any landlords in Connecticut listening to this broadcast, please give me a call afterwards. And we will make sure that you participate in this country's finest foreign policy, that you will be a partner in this great American tradition of welcoming refugees. Every landlord should dream of doing that.
Thank you, Chris. It's very eloquently said and important. When you bring a family over here, are you bringing an extended family, or is it usually, the parents and their children? So I know that in, Afghanistan and in rural areas, families are extended.
Yeah, sometimes they are, but mostly it is mom, dad, and kids. Okay. And it's usually 4, sometimes 5, sometimes 6 kids. So yes, they're large families. Sometimes they're extended. There is a group of 16 that's coming. We hope in the next month or so, and they're all extended. I mean, there's a couple of brothers. They each got married. They've got kids. They're bringing their parents. There's a sister-in-law, and their kids, so total of 16. We'd like to put them all together or reasonably close together. And, you know, who knows? Mark and his group are very ambitious. They're thinking about taking 2 families in the Middletown area. So maybe the next extended family that appears on our list, we'll give Mark a call and say, hey, are you guys ready?
Okay, let me turn over to Mark and ask him, what is your group doing and how is that helping Iris's mission? And tell us about your group. What is TVSU?
Well, sure. TVSU stands for The Valley Stands Up. We formed in November of 2016. And the reason that we formed actually had to do with immigration, because we noticed in our community that there was some anti-immigrant sentiment. A yard sign welcoming immigrants had been defaced. Teachers in the schools were worried about immigrant children being bullied. And so we formed a citizens group, The Valley Stands Up. It's a secular, nonpartisan, local group in order to do something tangible to counter that. We mobilized, and then in late 2019, we decided to form a refugee project to be co-sponsored with Iris, and started to plan for it. We got pulled the group together, did the research, decided that we would resettle the family in Middletown, Connecticut, for a lot of good reasons, and then COVID happened. And we actually had to go on hold for 9 months. There were very few or any refugees. And of course, it was during COVID, so a very difficult situation. But the group held together. And it's so that early in 2021, early this year, we reformed. And over the summer, we expanded the group from 15 to 30. We located translators. Of course, initially we had located actually a large roster of translators in Arabic and Swahili, but then of course the Afghan crisis happened, and we had to completely shift gears and start finding people who could speak Dari and Pashto. So we succeeded in that. We now have 6 translators who have offered their services to us. Now the big help, of course, came from Iris, and it actually came from Chris George. He gave me a call one morning and said, Mark, I'm driving to Middletown. Can you meet me in an apartment in an hour? And a member of our group who was actually getting dressed to go to a wedding dropped everything, met Chris at the apartment, and they signed the lease. So we had an apartment in Middletown, which, as I told people, I said, that really gave us wind at our back, to have that apartment. And talking about the landlords, this landlord was very eager to rent to refugees. He's been a fantastic landlord as we've worked through preparing the apartment for the family. So there's a lot of support there. And the other thing that I reflect on with this group is that it's very easy to take it for granted. But we have a lot to offer refugees in the U.S. and in Connecticut. When you go to fundraise, when you say, we need money in order to pay some of the expenses, that actually turns out to be not a serious problem. Fundraising is relatively easy. When you need furniture to furnish the apartment, people offer wonderful pieces of furniture to the apartment. But the big thing that I think is underappreciated is the human capital. When you actually form a group like this, and now we have about 30 people, we have this tremendous talent in the community. We have 4 social workers. We have people who have extensive experience in English for speakers of other languages. We have a group of veterans who are very motivated to help the Afghan refugees. We have a group of retired teachers. These teachers speak schools. They speak the language of schools, and so that they know how to best interact with the local schools, and with the ESOL programs at the schools in order to integrate the family. And so these are the kinds of things that really are encouraging when you form a community group.
That's great. I recently, I did live in Westport. I live now closer to New Haven, but I received an email that if I wanted to volunteer in my community and help Iris, they're helping Iris, forming a a group of churches and synagogues. You have to put in 8 hours of training at Iris. And I had initially offered, and then I've said, oh, well, this is going to be my, doing this show will help spread the word about Iris. But, that's a big commitment. I'm sure that's just the minimum. So people, are donating, their time to a great cause.
Yeah, the training is very important. And we've really emphasized that people in our group all need to be trained. When I get a call from a person who's thinking about joining our group, I really lay out what they're going to need to do. And I say, it's going to be about 8 hours of training. We're going to be doing a background check. There's other training involved. You're going to need to sign some documents. You're going to need to join one of our committees. It's going to be 4 hours a week when the family arrives, or actually before the family arrives. So I really lay it out, what is actually going to be required. The training is very important, though, both because of sort of the technical details that we get, but actually the thing that I think is most important about the training is the tone. And the tone is you have to be there. You have to hear from Iris about it. And the tone is, the goal is independence. Everything that we do needs to help the family get independent. We don't want to be paternalistic. In fact, I told the family, I said, we need to stop talking about our family. It's not our family. It's a family, okay? And the goal is independence. And that comes across very loud and clear in the training that Iris provides.
Thank you. We have a question from one of our viewers. Good question. What are the criteria to determine where to locate refugees? Would a state region with lower rent prices be more practical? Chris.
You want me to handle this? Yeah. So the Refugee Resettlement Program is a public-private partnership. The State Department and the Department of Homeland Security, they handle the first part, selection of the refugees, the security vetting of the refugees. They provide us with a little bit of funding and a lot of rules and regulations. So the State Department also determines policy about where refugees are resettled. The general rule is we want refugees resettled in every state. This is an American project. This is an American tradition. Every state should participate in refugee resettlement. And they do, except one, Wyoming. And we'll work on Wyoming. We don't need to talk about them tonight. But I got them in my sights. So every state should participate. Now, what does the State Department look for? Well, they look at the numbers of people who have been resettled in a certain town. How long do they stay? Do refugees who are resettled in, everywhere, USA, do they stay for only a couple of weeks and then leave? That's going to be an issue. Maybe they'll put fewer refugees there. How quickly do refugees get jobs in these towns? Are there some towns or cities where a lot of refugees are coming? And that says something about them. So they look at those factors. Affordability of apartments, yes, they look at that. But let's stop and think, what would happen if we did not put refugees in relatively sort of wealthy areas? You're allowing the wealth of an area. I mean, Connecticut's a wealthy state, and it's got a higher cost of living. Do we want Connecticut to be priced out of participating in this great American tradition of welcoming refugees? No, we don't. So we have a slogan: if it costs more, we raise more, because we don't want the wealth of a region to be a reason that refugees can't be resettled there. It's backwards. The wealth should be something that allows refugees to be resettled. They may not be able to stay there forever. They might just be able to stay for a year while the community group is helping them, but better to put them in places where, you know, all sorts of people live. That map behind me of Connecticut, yes, those red dots show all of the groups in the state that have welcomed refugees. Years ago, before we used this community-based program, all of those dots would be centered in Hartford, Bridgeport, and New Haven. That's not the way to integrate people into this country. We want to get them out, spread them out, and have them welcomed all over the place.
That's really interesting. I don't know if I would have thought about it that way. I guess being in a community like in the river towns or in Westport, where you know you will find people who maybe have the time to donate. You know, if they're retired teachers or social workers. I mean, is that something that factors into a community like yours, Mark?
Well, we do have quite a few retired people, but we've also got some people in their 20s and some middle-aged people. So it's a broad group. But yeah, I mean, mostly I'd say that it's mostly retired people because they have the time and frankly they have the expertise.
Good. Tell me a little.
I need to say something here because this reminds me there are a lot of refugee resettlement agencies in the country that do not use this model. Okay. They resettle refugees almost exclusively with their staff, the staff of the nonprofit. A few volunteers sprinkled in to drive people to medical appointments. Maybe they'll ask volunteers to set up an apartment. But it's really only in Connecticut where we give virtually all of the responsibilities to the volunteers. And I'll talk to directors in other refugee resettlement agencies in other states, and they'll say, you know, Chris, you're crazy. You can't trust volunteers to do this stuff. I say, what do you mean this stuff? Finding an apartment? These guys know how to find apartments. Furnish an apartment, they can do that. Connect them to healthcare? Come on. Enroll kids in school? He's got a group of 30. How many times have they had to enroll people in school? They can do it with their eyes closed. Find somebody a job? How many times has your group of 30 people looked for jobs? They're experts at finding jobs. This stuff can be done by volunteers. With a little bit of training, they do a great job.
That's really great to hear. I think our producer, Vandana, I had sent her a clip of the press conference, or, you know, a story about what happened yesterday. If we can play that. It shows an apartment and what's being done there, and a former refugee who had come here a few years ago.
More refugees from Afghanistan. The state is looking for landlords to offer up their homes. Connecticut is expected to resettle more than 500 Afghan refugees by the end of this year. 200 are already here. And the Integrated Refugee and Immigrant Services, known as IRIS, based in New Haven, welcomed 3 families just last night. But organizations that are helping are struggling right now to find affordable and safe places for them to live. Today in New Haven, movers set up an apartment for a new family that will arrive shortly. Part of the crew included a refugee from Afghanistan who came to America just 2 years ago and is now trying to pay it forward.
Came here, my apartment was ready. There's everything inside. I came in, I arrived in the home. I was surprised, oh, everything is ready, because I never seen the other countries like this.
The families coming in has been great. There's at least 4 to 6 families a week that we've been setting up units for, and the donations have been astounding.
We will co-sign the lease. So please, landlords, we're not asking you to put refugees to the front of the line. We just want them to be in line.
Now, to help out, the state's even providing funding for the security deposit and 2 months' rent as refugees get settled. If you're a landlord and you're interested, we do have more information right now on the Channel 3 app.
Hi, Sree.
Great. Thanks, Rose.
That was great to see that, and thank you. And Chris, you're as good in the daytime as you are at 9 p.m. at night. So thank you with this. We are at. We just have a few more minutes left with our wonderful guests, and Rose has been asking some great questions. We have Renu's got another one. Can we just one more time explain to people how IRIS works and how can people support you if you're in Connecticut? If you're not in Connecticut, are you raising money from the outside world? All of that. Can you talk about that, please?
Sure. So go to our website, irisct.org. That's IRISCT.org. And you'll see all sorts of ways that you can help us. But when people come up to me on the street and say, what can we do for Afghan refugees? How can we help IRIS? I tell them, form a group. Form a community group in your community of your friends and neighbors, and then contact us. We'll train you. Within a month, we'll place an Afghan family with you. That is the best way to help us get through this crisis now.
And you mean when you say place them with, you mean place you with the community, not like it's not like a foreign exchange student or anything like that. So,
no, and like Mark's group is going to be busy, enrolling kids in school, showing people where to catch the bus, the best way to shop, how to shovel snow, rake leaves, do all of the stuff that they've never done before. And
I know they're on this, and there's a group in Bridgeport too. And I know that you can volunteer, you take the family out for the first time shopping, just showing them around. And I'm sure in school, you probably, if you know a child has a certain problem or issue, as somebody who's maybe been a parent, you know what to say, as Mark said, to the school to get them settled. And that's really so key to being independent and living independently here. And tell us your overall goals, because and how is this different from when you brought in 200 refugees over the year? What is the time frame? How is the time frame here so different?
Well, we'll be bringing in again probably about 400 over the next 4 months. Then it'll probably taper off, and by the end of the federal fiscal year, which will be September of next year, we will have resettled probably about 700. Our organization, the state might even go over 1,000. There is another fine refugee resettlement agency in Bridgeport, Sree, and if you're in that area, you might want to contact them. But if you're somewhere in the United States listening to this, I saw one of your listeners was in Pennsylvania. Yeah. Contact your nearest refugee resettlement agency and say, we want to form a group and be a co-sponsor. And if they say, oh, we don't really use that model, you say, well, you should use that model. And then contact us and I'll convince the director to do it.
And would you, let's say, I'm just saying, if you're in California or Pennsylvania, would you just Google, state resettlement, resettlement agency in California, in Pennsylvania, and you would come up with where it is?
That's right. If you have any trouble, get in touch with me if you have any trouble.
Okay. We will direct everybody to you.
Well, I feel like, Chris, you've got plenty going on. You don't need random people calling to help people in other states, but that's what a stand-up guy you are. As we talk about the valley stands up, there may be some confusion, Mark, in terms of which valley this is. So can you just tell us again?
It's the Connecticut River Valley, lower Connecticut River Valley.
What towns are we talking about?
Well, it really started in Chester, Deep River, and Essex. But as I expanded the group, we now have people all the way from Meriden down to East Lyme.
Okay.
Thank you. Meanwhile, we're looking at the website for irisct.org. Chris, I just went in and made a very modest donation, partly to test how fast it is to make a donation. After you said it, I did that and got my receipt already. That's how fast it is, folks. Please support irisct.org. Support the refugee agency in your state. it does make a difference. As we start to close out here, a couple of questions for both Chris and Mark. One thing that people may not understand is that we have all these large numbers of people that are coming in to the United States, but every single family needs direct and important help, right? It's not like, oh, these folks are only taking care of X number. It sounds like a small number, but everyone requires so much energy, so much work, so many resources. If you can talk about that a little bit, Chris. And then my question for Mark would be to talk about how you convince people to do this and help you get together with this and form that sponsorship, co-sponsorship group, I think is the term used. Chris, go ahead, and then over to Mark.
Yes, I mean, the conflict, the crisis in Afghanistan is still going on. So this is a very raw and current crisis. Every Afghan refugee that I have welcomed in New Haven over the past couple of months, they're always on their cell phone, and they're inevitably chatting or talking with someone who is back in Afghanistan, who's pressuring them to do whatever they can to save them and to bring them to the United States. They're under a lot of pressure. There might even be feelings of guilt. They have made it, but their parents, their brothers, their sisters, friends, others have been left behind. So there are some serious mental health issues that we need to address. Not to mention other traumatic experiences that they might have had. So yes, they need intensive help in the beginning. As Mark said earlier, the goal of this program is to help them regain some control over their life. They've been pushed around, you know, at checkpoints. They've had guns pointed at them. They've seen people shot. They want to regain some control over their lives, and that's the goal of this program.
Thank you very much, Chris. Mark, your thoughts?
Yeah, I actually have never convinced anyone to join our group. People call me and they want to join, and then I give them the little lecture about what is going to be required of them. But the recruitment has not been a problem at all. And of course, a lot of it has to do, frankly, with the images that people have seen on television. When you know, everyone has seen this. It's terrible. They realize that the families are going to need help, and of course, many Americans, when they've heard the stories from their own families of their grandparents or their great grandparents, and what they went through when they immigrated. So this is, you know, we're an immigrant nation, and that resonates with people.
Can I just say that as someone who spends too much time on social media and hears so many terrible things about immigrants and refugees, to hear both of you gentlemen not just talking the talk, but doing the work that's required is really refreshing. And I'm so grateful. And I know folks who are watching around the world will appreciate what you're doing. We are going to come back to you for a final question. We're going to do a little bit of housekeeping for about a minute and then come back to you. I'll just say my question to each of you is going to be to look at the camera one more time individually and tell people why they should help, well, not just your organization, but help refugees. You've been saying that in many ways already. We're going to come back to you so you can say that one more time. So please stand by for just a minute as I tell everybody that we're very excited to tell you about some of our other shows coming up, including She's on Call, which is a wonderful show that takes place on Sundays. And we have an important topic this time, prostate cancer and men's sexual health. Our friends, Dr. Sujana Chandrasekhar and Marina Kurian, surgeons in New York and New Jersey, are going to talk about COVID and talk about this issue with these two other doctors, Sophia Cameron and Ashley Winter. So please join us 11 a.m. Sundays. Just search She's on Call, and there are so many great previous episodes. You will learn a lot. And Rose is one of the producers of that. And Rose is also the executive producer and host of her own show. And it's called Women to Follow. It's based on our hashtag. And Rose, tell us a little bit about why people should tune in and where they can find it.
Yes, you can tune in on my own Facebook page. Everything is under my same name. So it's on Facebook, Rose Horowitz, on Twitter at Rose Horowitz 31, and on YouTube on my new channel. My producer is Stefan Kaplan. What I started a trend, Woman to Follow, which is about amplifying the voices of women on social media. And I had done a lot of about 20 written profiles of women in all fields, from virtual reality to journalism and government. And now, and it became it was a trend. And I have there's a list on Twitter. And then I've been doing, become a producer on these shows since the pandemic. And people were saying, well, why don't you do your own show? So I'm taking that, and I interviewed, one of my guests was Lena, I don't know if you've heard of her, Lena Abi Rafa, and she was is head of the Arab Institute for Women, I think was the first group like that. And she had lived in Afghanistan and wrote about it, and is, I think, currently updating her book. So it was very interesting, and we spoke, and she said that the women are going to keep fighting. So I think we've been seeing that, and so I hope people will tune in, and I will announce when my next guest is. So
thank you. And just before we get back to our guest final announcement, we want to tell everybody about the New York Times read along. For 6 years now, I've been reading the New York Times out loud every Sunday morning like a crazy person, and we do it on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and YouTube. And we have a fantastic guest, Pulitzer Prize winning photojournalist who has worked with the New York Times, Newsday, Jet, and Ebony. Ozir Muhammad will be with us. He's at Ozmuha on Twitter, and he also happens to be the grandson of Elijah Muhammad. And so please join us at 8 a.m. to 10:30 a.m. very early in the morning, 8:30 to 10 a.m. on Sundays for the New York Times read along. And with that, we're coming back to our guests who've been waiting patiently, and we're giving them a chance to tell us one more time why they should be helping, why we should all be helping them and the great work they do. First, we'll go to Chris George of IRIS, Connecticut, irisct.org. Support them, folks.
Yeah, so I talk about this a lot, and depending on the audience, sometimes I will emphasize all of the ways that the United States benefits from refugees. They strengthen our economy. They diversify us. They will help us learn about the world and help us learn new languages. They open new businesses. But, the essence of the refugee program, why are we helping people who have suffered persecution and were forced to flee their country? Just because it's the human thing to do. And when you see a mother and father and their 4 little kids, you imagine what they have been through to escape the brutal regime of the Taliban. All they want is a future for their kids. All they want is for their girls to get an education. All they want is to live in safety and in peace. And that's what all of us want. So why not give other people, when we have so many resources, an opportunity to have that?
Beautifully said. Thank you. And that's Chris George, the executive director of irisct.org, a resettlement agency in Connecticut. Thank you very much. And let's go to Mark for the final word.
Yeah, I think from the point of view of volunteers, we've been through obviously a very difficult time worldwide with COVID. And as I mentioned, we see these terrible images on the television of the situation in Afghanistan. Before that, the refugee crisis worldwide. And so rather than just sort of sitting and passively watching and regretting all of this, being a volunteer is your opportunity to actually do something about it. You'll feel a lot better, and you will help another person, but mostly you'll make the world a better place in your own way. It's a very tangible, a very personal activity, and I encourage you to consider it.
Thank you very much, folks. Those are our guests, Chris and Mark. We'll let them go and say thank you very much for your time tonight, and good luck. You're doing God's work, as I said earlier as well. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Rose. Thank you, Sree.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Rose, that was fantastic. Thank you so much for bringing them to us.
Oh, great.
Our show is a disproportionate number of guests from Connecticut, considering we were a worldwide show, but that's because you live in Connecticut and you brought us.
I'd heard about this group for a long time and heard that, it's really interesting that he says I don't know, I never researched it, but the whole way they're doing this is interesting, to pull upon the resources of a community and help this, instead of, I thought, you would think it's like, oh, I have to take this, family in for, 2 months.
Right. But it's not. Yeah. It sounds like they've done a great job. And I'm really proud that we were able to talk about them here. And so thank you very much to Chris and Mark. And before I talk to you for a second, I just want to do one more shout out to our fabulous sponsors and also to your show. It's great that we were able to talk about that. And you're just doing such a great job with that show. And it's great. And everyone, please follow Rose on Twitter and follow Women to Follow on Twitter, and then find them on social so that you can follow her there as well. But we want to thank our sponsor one more time.
We're throwing this dinner thing next Saturday. You guys should come.
You invited who? Local shopkeeper. We are running a charity service, huh?
Sure, Aunties Without Borders.
Sheila, it's me, Bhairavi, Delhi University. Your mother was incredibly brave.
Back then, my life was complicated. I want your life to be simple.
Parents are full of surprises. Our parents are full of
Okay.
That's right. India Sweets and Spices is the name.
It looks great.
Yeah, it looks so much fun. It's coming out on theaters in America November 19th, and they're one of our sponsors. So thank you very much. And if you'd like to be a sponsor, please email me, Sree@Sree.net. You see it right on the screen.
One of them was our guest, your
Yes,
friend.
Manisha Koirala, the great Bollywood actress, twice. And it's, of course, very popular show when she was there with us. So, Rose, thank you for this.
Thank you.
And thank you for all your hard work. And Vandana, our other producer, watching in New Delhi at an ungodly hour. And it's going to get a little better, or she'll tell me if it's going to get better or worse, because the time change means there's a change in the hour. So I think it gets a little better for her. Our shows will be at 7:30 in the morning instead of 6:30 in the morning.
She's telling us it'll get better. So
okay, good. Thank you. And thanks very much, everybody. And good night.
Thank you.